Hello, Charles.
Welcome on Sunday night. Welcome to listeners, one and all, as
Did
we
you
head.
say welcome to two listeners?
Welcome to listeners.
Okay, yeah, I thought you said there was two listeners.
There was a
I thought
negative
that's
way.
double. That's double normal. Double.
You say that, but we've just received a compliment from somewhere on our first review of the year.
Really?
Yes, we indeed. Apparently, some
Yeah.
that's very exciting. That was obviously the high standard of Graham's reviewing of the year of
Was it was it
albums.
was it Melvin Bragg saying how good it was?
I'm sure it was Melvin Bragg saying how good.
So,
Maybe,
so what did
yeah,
it say? What did it say about us? I want to
I
bask
couldn't.
in this
That's the
glory. What
frustration
did it
is. The
say?
frustration is I couldn't get it to open, so I've no idea.
Excellent.
It came from it came from some excitable thing saying,
Buzzsprout.
oh,
Was it on
Yeah,
Buzzsprout?
probably Buzzsprout congratulating us on someone actually
Yeah.
bothering to listen.
It'd be AI generated.
Oh, how can you say that, Graham? That's so disappointing. How can you say that? So last week, this is the voice of Charles Hutchinson, not just last week, but this week as well. That was the voice of Graham Chalmers. Last week, Graham and Charles, we looked at choices for albums of the year. This week, we're going to focus. We also touched on film. We touched briefly on book selections from me for this year, but this week we're going to look at Graham's choices for books of the year, and also at each others with the choices that we've made for our films of the year. And if we have any time left at the end, we might just briefly talk about television highlights of the year. So, Graham, I think we should start, if we should, may, with books.
Yeah. Well, there was a few books I could have picked that I didn't pick. So I have read books that weren't released this year just to see it, see how things go. And I
Mm.
read Robin Hitchcock's memoir, 1967, How I Got There and Why I Never Left, published by Constable. And it's a short book, and it's all about his time at a posh public school in the mid 60s and what it was like to be in that public school and how it was like to be in love with music in 66, 67. And it's a really good book, but eventually, because he's a bit of a dadaist surrealist in a very modest, very cozy way.
Mm.
Eventually, the book gets tied up in surrealism. But apart from that, it was great. I also read two classic books which influenced the 1960s counterculture and the
Yes.
New Left movement. R.D. Laing's The Divided Self from 1960, published by Penguin, and Herbert Marcuse's Eros and Civilization from 1956, published by Routledge. And I was hoping both books would help me understand the 60s and then throw light on the present. But all that happened was that I read both books and it ended up as a cul-de-sac because R.D. Laing's basic argument boiled down to one ridiculously simple sentence is that madness doesn't truly exist. People's mental state is a reflection of society and the people closest to them. And Herbert Marcuse was trying to interpret individualism and revolution via psychology and Freud, and whether the question of whether individual freedom, especially in sexuality and self-indulgence, whether that was compatible with revolution. And he came to the conclusion that yes, you could be a revolutionary and be into sex and individualism, and that those both fed into the 1960s. The trouble
Yeah.
was that having fed into the 1960s, the end result has been that in terms of psychology and psychiatry, you've now got people being supposedly cared for in the community who are
Mm.
wandering around who are not really fit to be in the community. And in
Very
terms of like
damaged by their
individualism,
experiences,
in,
ultimately. Yes.
yeah, individualism has ended up rather than being about freedom, it's been about oppressing other people and not taking any responsibility for society as a whole, which does not help revolutions or any ideas that aren't
No.
right wing. So both ideas which led to the glorious 1960s and the explosion of liberal left wing ideas have both eventually led in a right wing direction. So I was a bit disappointed. So I can't possibly make those my books of the year. Instead, I'm going to actually
No.
pick three books which
Yes.
have come out in the last 12 months, which is amazing.
Far away, Graham. Number three.
Well, a quick plug number three for Toby Manning's Mixing Pop and Politics, which is a Marxist history of popular music on repeated books. Now, we had him on the show
We
earlier in the
did.
year.
We did.
The book actually came out last year, but I'm still rereading it because although it sounds like a heavy title, it's actually easy to read. And if you forget that he's actually interpreting pop hits from 1955 to the present day through the view of like left-wing politics and Marxism. If you forget about that, it's actually a brilliant summary of pop history over the last 60 years. And his insights into what songs mean, even when the singer doesn't actually realize, he or she doesn't realize herself what
Yes.
they're singing,
Yes.
is amazing. So it deserves to be still in the top three, even though it's technically not quite from this year. Number two is a book which is definitely from this year, and it's published by Random House. It's by Owen Hathaway, The Alienation Effect, How Central European Emigres Transformed the British 20th Century. And Owen, who came to the Fringe for me and Harrogate in 2012, I think it was, partly to judge the best modern building in Harrogate competition,
I remember.
which was a spiffing wheeze of mine, bearing in mind that Harrogate's quite traditional. Uh, he's written lots of books about brutalist and modern architecture in Britain and Europe. And this book is about how the people who actually invented brutalism and modernist architecture, how they all fled Nazi Germany, Nazi Austria, Hungary, Poland, Czech Republic in the 1930s and came into Britain. And they helped transform Britain from being a little bit of a traditionalist backwater into a more modern cultural and artistic society. And it's just a brilliantly researched book. You will learn so much about Britain and British post-war history in a way they've never thought about before.
Mm. Number one.
I seem to remember you were saying like, well, which figures came to Britain that you might
Oh,
recognise?
yes.
Now, you and me,
Yeah.
yeah,
The,
you
li-
and
the,
me
li-
know
the,
our.
the list was phenomenal. It was a phenomenal list. Absolutely, it
Well,
was.
there's some more, and these are names which, when I went to university in the 1980s, and so did you, these were names which were still famous in the 1980s
Yes.
in British academia and in wider culture. Now,
Mm.
they're no longer as famous because most of them have died, and British culture and academia has completely moved on. So anybody below the age of 40, 50 probably doesn't know who these people are. But these were once really important figures. And this is
Mm.
some of the names: Alexander Korda,
Yep.
Karl Reiss, Wittgenstein, Isaac Deutscher, Arthur Koestler, Oskar Kokoschka, Kurt Schwitters, Friedrich Hayek, Emmerich Pressburger, Karl Popper, Lucian Freud. Lucian Freud isn't actually British.
No, no.
So much of cutting edge British culture and artistic culture after the Second World War wasn't actually British.
And yet we kind of claim it as ours.
Well, the British are very good at stealing ideas from abroad and then forgetting where we got them from.
That goes back to colonialism, I suspect, Graham.
Yeah, we're natural
The
magpies
afterburner of
on a
colonialism.
global scale.
Yeah, it goes back to Elgin's marbles.
Exactly, yeah. Elgin lost his marbles.
He did indeed. So did Greece, and they're still losing their marbles over it now. So number one.
Yeah, number one is an amazing book by another great writer we had in the show earlier in the year, Rob Cowan, The
Mm.
North Road, about the A1, about the whole history of the A1, but not written from a sort of like boring academic point of view where
Well,
he's read lots of books. He actually did the whole walk of the original A1 route from London into Scotland by foot and lived rough. He did sometimes stay in B&Bs, but a lot of time he lived in a makeshift tent.
mm. It
Rob,
was
Rob is a
truly the
cross.
lived experience.
Well, yeah, he does. He likes living experience. He was in a band when he was a younger man. He
Mm.
was a bit of a rock and roller, and just because he's a respected, revered, well, he's called a nature writer, but he's not really a nature writer. He does include nature writing in what he does, but he's way wider than that, and the books were that. So, like, as he's moving up the A1 from London to Scotland, you not only get his own experiences, you get the history of every spot he stops in, but he gives you the history not just from the point of view of like someone who's read the books. He brings the history to life. So whatever happened in the era he stops in, he
Mm.
makes the people and the events live again like they were still alive right now. So it brings history alive in a way that you don't get from most proper history books. And he
I
also
remember.
brings in his own personal history because he's got family members whose own
Yes.
histories 100 years ago, 150 years ago, linked to areas around day one. So it's a mix of personal memoir, personal biography, personal history, British history, natural history, social and cultural history, all wrapped up into one exceedingly well written travel journal, which is constantly enlightening and full of emotion as well as facts and ideas. And because he's from the north, that he was from Ilkley, he doesn't see Britain through the eyes of someone who's gone to Oxford and Cambridge. He sees Britain through the eyes of someone who's proudly British, but who isn't proudly establishment. And so it's like a almost like an alternative vision of not only Britain now, but alternative vision of Britain's past. It's a phenomenally brilliant book.
The other thing I remember liking about it is, of course, the alternative name of that road is the Great North Road.
Mm.
And if you like the M1, which is a much more manufactured road, was the Great Road South. But the A1
Yeah,
was actually to benefit the North as much as the South. The M1 is part of the more modern thinking that's entirely for the benefit of the South. And I think the contrast, therefore, again, that he found true characterization and true character in the A1 as a road that kind of defined uh, being British and being English rather more than the M1 does. It's, if you like, it became the inferior of the two roads. It became the less important of the two roads, except that again was part of typically of what happens in Britain, how it's shaped by sudden preference for something that's going to benefit the South.
yeah, well, history is written by the winners, that old cliche. And since the
Mm,
South won, since the power and establishment is based in the London area and the home counties, their version of history is something that suits them
mm,
perpetually. And if you're not from that background and you've got any intelligence, you know that Britain and British history is not the same as the long held establishment viewpoint of
mm,
it. And you know
no.
this when you read the Times cultural section, and the
Yes.
Times is a well written,
Mm,
intelligent newspaper. But their book section is books obsessed with Tudor history, and
yeah.
their idea of Britain is people is based on people at the top. Really, it's the
Mm.
history of people at the top. It's not the
History of
history of what
victors, Graham.
actually
History of
happened.
victors. Yeah. So, yeah, thoroughly recommend it. And we're hoping to speak to Rob in an early edition in the new year, I think, aren't we, as well, just to reflect on the fact that, we've chosen this book as the book of the year. And
Yeah, I think we are. Yes.
and I think we thank him for doing one of our several interviews that we did this year. Now, Graham, we come to films of the year. Shall I? Do you want to do? Do you want to do one choice by me, one choice by you? Do
Well,
you want to do
I
that?
think we should mention too that I'm not gonna have these films in the top five because the competition's too fierce. But I'm not going to put Tinseltown in with Kiefer Sutherland and Rebel Wilson, even though it was
Filmed
filmed
in
largely in
Knaresborough.
Knaresborough, and Knaresborough's right in our doorstep. So even though sentimentally I should want Tinseltown to be in the top five, it's a Christmas film. I
It's
mean,
not there. It's Christmas
yeah.
froth. Yeah.
The other film that isn't there, which nearly made it, was we interviewed Kim Hopkins, the director of Still Pushing Pineapples,
Mm.
the
Shane
great
York this
recently
very
released
day.
documentary about the last remaining singer of Black Lace, which is a truly brilliant documentary, and
Mm.
it's almost like a companion piece to part of the North Road book. You could watch
Yes.
that film, then read the book, and you could see some sort of link. And that's not quite in the top five, but it's nearly there.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
But so
So
my first one is going to be a
go on.
personal choice because
Yes.
I'm a massive Beatles fan. So One to One, John and Yoko, the documentary by Kevin MacDonald and Sam Rice Edwards, was a new way of doing a documentary music biography film. The only other comparison was Moonage Daydream by David Bowie, which came about 3 years ago, which is very
Yes.
immersive and psychedelic and
Mm.
mixed dialogue from Bowie with real footage and atmospheric invented backgrounds. And One to One is a very, very good, very personal, very immersive portrait of John and Yoko in American New York between 70 and 73 and their short-lived period of being involved not only in
Counterculture.
American
Mm.
counterculture, but in American left-wing politics. And it's fantastically made and
It's one
quite,
of my choices as well. I made it my music film of the year, Graham. So I'm
uh,
sharing that with you. Absolutely. I thought part of the significance of the film was the way that they showed John and Yoko watching television a lot at home, and then you'd see how that would feed into songwriting and their political agenda, what so they weren't just musicians at this point. They genuinely were taking part in counterculture and making political statements, and they were being followed around by the media. Whatever John did was seen as hugely significant. You can't imagine anyone following Ed Sheeran around in the same way. You just can't. The
Yeah,
weight and significance of John Lennon absolutely came across in that.
you also can't imagine the FBI bugging Ed
Oh,
Sheeran's house, or
no.
the American government having a file on him and then eventually try to get him deported. Like, you can't imagine that happened to Ed Sheeran. But the thing
Uh,
about Lennon and Yoko was that they'd watch TV just like anybody else, but then they'd
mm,
go out and do something about it. They wouldn't
exactly.
just watch TV. And they were
Exactly.
quite brave until
Yeah.
they realized that the American government was seriously going to crack
Kick
down
them
on them.
out. He was
And
going to kick him out.
then his
Yeah.
short-lived left-wing political period sort of ended.
The
And
other joy,
you
of
were
course,
quite right
Graham.
because in the film itself, you see him befriending Jerry Rubin and other
Yes.
left wingers, and at first you
Yeah.
think this is great,
Mm,
but then when the film shows you what Jerry Rubin and his followers were actually like, they
yeah.
were irresponsible people who were sort of meddling in politics almost for their own ego's sake.
Mm,
And
yes.
when Lennon and Yoko sort of realized this, that's when they started to like see the light and realize they were being dragged into something that perhaps was foolhardy, even though the intentions of their involvement were good. They realized that this is going to go end up really badly wrong, and also it's going to end up with things that we don't actually support. So at
No.
that point, John and Yoko decided, okay, we're not doing all this stuff anymore. We're going to go back to being artists, not politicians.
Last thing to say on that film, I think, is the concert footage is so exciting as well. This was actually, I think it's said to be the only full concert. This was just to remind everyone, it was the one-to-one benefit concert at Madison Square Gardens, 1972. And you, what a powerhouse performer Lennon is. That absolutely came across in that as well. So everything fed in to so you had Lennon monologues, not speaking to camera, but just voiceovers of what Lennon was saying. You had the concert performance and the powerhouse performer that he was on stage. You had, as we both mentioned, the way that their television viewing habits. I thought it was a complete documentary, and that's why I made it my music film of the year.
Kevin McDonald actually rebuilt the interior of John and Yoko's Greenwich Village
Oh, yes, he
apartment,
did.
basement
Yes, he did.
apartment,
Yeah,
which is quite amazing.
yeah. So that, Graham, you've had one of your choices. Give us your next choice. I've obviously mentioned that I shared that choice. So your next choice.
Well, the thing is, you know what I think about films this year. A lot of interesting films, pretty much like music, films and music. A lot of interesting stuff, but not many great films because
Mm,
the films either seem to lack a point, willfully lack a point, and whiffle waffle around, or they're totally didactic and totally inflexible in their view on the world. And so I find it, you know, in that environment, I'm going to pick films which I think are boldly in one direction. So number four is Bulk by Ben Wheatley, starring Sam Riley, which is an amazing sci-fi time travel film in black and white. It's a bit like Christopher Nolan's Tenet, except on a tiny, tiny budget and in black and white.
chances are,
And it's
Graham, chances
yeah,
are that not
it's
the small scale of it, as you mentioned, is so small scale. I don't know how many people even might have seen it yet. We saw it, of course, at Edinburgh International Film Festival, and so it's one of those ones you wonder actually what might happen to this film, and I wish people could see it.
yeah. He's got another film coming out already as Ben Wheatley,
Mm,
brilliant director, and I think this film won't be seen by many people at all.
mm,
But I really liked it, partly because it's influenced by Jean-Luc Godard's
yes,
Alphaville, which I spotted when one of the characters in Bulk mentions Figaro Pravda.
yeah,
And in Alphaville, that's the newspaper that the locals read in the new zone of the universe that the
mm,
detective goes into as a spy.
mm,
So I thought, oh, that's a little reference to Alphaville there.
yes,
Another reason is that, well, Sam Riley's always good. The other reason is that it's quite hypnotic. The way it keeps on slipping in between time zones back and forth the whole time
mm,
is it, it makes no sense logically, but it feels right. And so it has a hypnotic effect on you. It's a bit, the film's almost like a black and white drug trip.
And just to recall the last thing with recalling that film, the film credits are the best film credits of the year. The way he did the film credits which was, I think, from memory, kind of
Oh,
handwritten.
it was all handwritten. Yeah.
And it was so inventive. It summed up how the film was inventive anyway, but that was in keeping with such an inventive film. So I think that's a really, really good choice, Graham. That is absolutely. So I'm going for my next choice is there's going to be two British films. So I'm going to give you the third choice for that is
Mm.
the film Steve. This is Cillian Murphy. Um, how do you follow up Oppenheimer? Well, you do something on a completely different scale, much, much, much lower key, and yet with that same magnetic concentration of, that he has in performance. Those eyes are not unique in cinema, but Cillian Murphy's eyes are, they're worth $1 million, aren't they, in filmmaking
Mm.
terms? So the story behind this, just briefly, is directed by Tim Milans from not it was a novella written that was adapted by the writer of the novel into a script that changed the focus from being Shy, which is the name of the novel, to being who is living in this a residential home for troubled boys. The focus instead switched to the character Steve, which is Cillian Murphy's character, who's the head teacher. And in his own way, he is as troubled as the boys. Part of his trouble is he cares so much about them. Part of it is how on earth does he cope with the responsibilities of that? And it's a typical thing of understaffing, the boys having their difficulties. It's also a very bravura film in the way it uses the visuals, and in particular the sound design, which is it's inside the young Shy's head all the time. He's got his headphones on and he's listening to basically dub bass music, and that propels through the whole film as well. It's yes, it's a low key film. I thought it was absolutely sure of its tone and the way it was presented, and as ever with Cillian Murphy, as I say, a magnetic performer, and his
Such a
own
great actor as Killian.
absolutely, and his commitment to
He's
this
always
film.
likable. No matter
Yes,
if he's playing a bad guy, good guy, he's
well,
always likable.
absolutely true. And so that's my first of my two British film recommendations. The
What's the other
soundtrack is
one?
by Ben Salisbury and Jeff Barrow. So that
Oh yeah.
I'm trying to remember who the script was by, and forgive me, I may have to look that up. So, do you want my second British choice, Graham? Before
Yes,
you do
please,
one?
yes.
Okay, so I think this is a fairly predictable choice for someone who always tries to champion British films. This film was the most joyous 100 minutes I spent anywhere this year.
Mm.
The Ballad of Wallace Island. This is directed by
Oh yeah,
James.
directed by James Griffiths.
This is the script is by Tim Kay
Mm.
and Tom Badson, and they play the two main characters in this. It's a comedy drama filmed in Pembrokeshire, Wales. Actually, it was on a private beach. It was so low key in
Mm.
budget that was the only way they could do it, and a nearby farm. And it's a story of two former folk duo bandmates and their former lovers, and they're reunited for a private show by an eccentric millionaire. That's Tim Kay's character, Charles Heath. And Tom Badson and Carrie Mulligan are the former folk duo, Maguire and Mortimer. So there's tensions
Mm.
rise between the two former lovers. At the same time, there's reconciliation that goes on. And it's melancholic in its tone about men and masculinity when you're in midlife. At the same time, the character that resonates the most within it, and it has a radiance about her, is Carrie Mulligan's role.
Mm.
So she's surrounded by melancholia, but she has this radiance, and she also has rather splendid and unexpectedly so singing chops, a side of her I didn't know. I just love the tone of this film. It's only 100 minutes.
Mm.
Many films are far too long. The performances are utterly delightful, and it's everything about why I love British filmmaking when it sticks to what British filmmaking does best. It is, of course, in style, an echo of Ealing comedies. That's fine.
Mm.
We were masters of that form of comedy. it's understated and yet it's hugely impactful for that. So if people have not yet seen that film, why not go and see it? So that was my British film of the year. Graham, you're next.
Sounds good. Well, number three, and this is another film that you and me saw at the Edinburgh National Film Festival, is Islands, which technically
yes.
is a German film directed by
Yes.
Jan Ole Gerster. But it stars Sam Riley,
Again.
who is absolutely superb. If Islands was a bigger film and a bigger hit, he'd get nominated for an Oscar. He's
Yeah.
so good as the washed up tennis coach.
Yes.
He's like a sort of like faded greatness and faded good looks, but bags of character. He's absolutely brilliant. And you can tell the film, which is about how this washed up but still handsome tennis coach on the island of Fuerteventura makes a living by being a tennis coach and a bit of a aging gigolo. And he gets wrapped up in a sort of like mystery thriller sort of murder thing. But
Yes.
it never turns into a sort of like Poirot or Miss Marple. It's quite an existential movie with a lot of great visuals of the desert island. And you can tell it's a great film because Jack Farthing, the other main British actor in it, who always plays posh roles, and who's never been anything heavyweight, really.
No.
Even
No. No.
he
No.
is great in this film. And when an actor who's not usually great is great, you know it's a good film. And by the end of Islands, this sort of mystery thriller bit takes over from the existentialism, and it sort of dissipates the ending. It should have stuck to its guns, really, because if it had done, it would have been an all-time classic film. But as it is, it's still a great film. I really enjoyed Islands. And Sam Riley, who we met at the National Film Festival briefly,
Indeed.
is so good in this film.
I think that's a very good choice, Graham. The film had some limitations, probably actually through budget, may well have been an influence on that. But I think as an individual performance, that was by Sam Riley. That it was one of the great acting performances of the year, absolutely. So, Graham, I'll give you my American choices of the year, and one is a kind of honourable mention, and one is a choice. And my recollection is actually you didn't like this film as much as I did, so. My
Yeah.
American film of the year is One Battle After Another. Paul Thomas Anderson, liberal thinking American filmmaker. But this was with a massive budget, $150 million budget. You could say it was a blockbuster film, but I think blockbusters tend to be empty, have no soul to them, and just full of tricksy camera work and whatever. This was a state of the nation film, and it's a state of a rotten nation film amid the rise in fascism. It's not Donald Trump, but it's a film that will clearly would annoy Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, the Thomas Pynchon novel Vineland was based on was set in the 1980s.
Yes,
in the Reagan era, whereas this one's clearly in the present day.
It is. So the main characters, Leonardo DiCaprio is a hippie. He's called Bob Ferguson in this role. Sean Penn, who I think takes the movie role of the movie, is Colin Stephen J. Lockjaw, which tells you everything about it. He's the worst kind of American soldier, absolutely loyal, frighteningly so to what he will do. He'll do anything in the cause of fascism.
He's the most cartoonesque bit of the film.
He is, but I think that's fine within America right now.
Very Dr. Strangelove, actually.
Yes,
that character,
I think that's a very good call. And Benicio del Toro does just a splendid bit of scene stealing in a significant minor role.
Give that man nothing, and he'll produce a great performance.
Absolutely. And then I think the performance that may have gone a bit underrated is Teyana Taylor's performance. Her character is called Perfidia Beverly, and it's she who with DiCaprio is trying to rectify the situation, and she's definitely a name to watch for the future, I think. So for me, because we are in the most dangerous, volatile times, I think, in my life. I don't think that's understated to say that. I think we are.
The Western world, it's usually dangerous elsewhere anyway. But for the Western world, it's the most dangerous.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. And therefore, for a film to address that, I think probably with echoes of 1970s great American political filmmaking. So the honourable mention.
I thought it wasn't as good as that, although it's very enjoyable and clearly a good film.
Absolutely.
Because if the book by Thomas Pynchon has too much story, this I thought had too little. It was so well made and so well acted. It felt so good. It had a great feel to it and some great action scenes. But I didn't feel quite enough happened. But I know
think
people disagree.
So my brief honourable mention is The Brutalist. Adrian Brody, of course, award garlanded, and it's another strongly political film. In that case, it's a Brady Corbett film set in post-war America. Brutalist architecture, but also brutalist behavior by Guy Pearce's character. Very powerful piece. Of course, it won some of the major awards. I'll just finish by saying, Graham, the overrated film of the year was the Oscar winner, Anora. Not really. I think people will look back on that film and say, oh, "Why on earth did that win the Oscar?" So overrated.
It had some merit, but it certainly wasn't best film of the year.
The script wasn't good enough, and the performances weren't good enough. Mikey Madison ended up winning an Oscar. Anyway, back to you, Graham.
Well, I think both The Brutalist and A Complete Unknown, James Mangold's A Complete Unknown about Bob Dylan in the early 60s, starring Timothée Chalamet. I think both those films had brilliant first halves. In the second half, the story seemed to go AWOL in both films. So I couldn't give them a small blessing anyway. So to stop us running out of time, I'm going to briefly say my top two films are Mortician, the Iranian-Canadian film we both saw at Edinburgh National Film Festival, which is another film by that great Iranian director, Abdul Reza Kanani. And she herself lives in Canada as an Iranian exile because of the politics of Iran. And the film's about a mortician in Canada who's not political but is living there anyway. And because the mortician deals with the bodies, obviously, of Iranian emigres and exiles, he ends up slowly getting dragged into politics involving the Iranian regime and dissidents living in Canada that he has no interest at all at the start. And bit by bit, he's dragged into it. And it's all in black and white. And it's brilliantly acted. It's brilliantly weighted. And the points it makes at the beginning are carried through all the way at the end, but not in a predictable fashion. And when then this happens, it's done so brilliantly. It's exactly what The Brutalist and A Complete Unknown don't have. It's a director who knows the point of the film and takes it all the way to the end. It's a great film.
Good choice, Graham. Good choice.
My film of the year is because it's got balls the size of the Soviet Union. Is Begonia by Yorgos Lanthimos, who obviously had big hits with Poor Things and The Favourite. And again, it stars Emma Stone and also Jesse Plemons. And it's a very strong satire, a very destabilizing satire, which shapeshifts constantly in the film in some radical, very brave and very strange ways. And again, it's about the state of America now and the move towards fascism, but in a sort of sci-fi film type way. And by the end, the changes in plot line and direction and the boldness of the ideas are so staggering that your jaw's practically lying on the floor as you watch the last 10 minutes. So for that reason only, Begonia is my film of the year.
Excellent choice, Graham. I thoroughly enjoyed that film too. So there we are. We say thank you to our listeners as ever. And next week, we're going to take a look at gigs. We're going to take a look at theatre. We're going to take a look at art. We'll probably reflect a little bit on Bradford City of Culture as well. Thank you for listening as ever. Graham.
I'm also going to look at Lily Allen's West End Girl album because everybody loves that album. And I'm going to say why it isn't as good as The Guardian, for example, said it is.
I look forward to it. I've yet to hear it, but I want to listen to it before you make your judgment. So we say goodnight to our listeners. Good night, listeners. Thank you.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic Sub production.